What if the legend of King Arthur wasn't a fairy tale, but a brutal fight for survival? A lost prince, raised in the streets, unknowingly pulls Excalibur from the stone, instantly making him the most hunted man in the kingdom. A power-hungry tyrant will do anything to destroy him. A dark sorceress lurks in the shadows, waiting for her moment to strike. And as the final battle looms, the fate of Camelot hangs by a thread. This isn't the Arthurian story you think you know. This is betrayal, war, and revenge at its finest. And trust me, the ending will leave you speechless. For generations, humans and sorcerers lived in harmony, bound by an unspoken truce. However, the equilibrium shattered when Mordred, the ambitious leader of the sorcerers, sought dominion beyond his realm. Assembling a formidable army of magic wielders and colossal war beasts, he unleashed a relentless siege upon the kingdom of Camelot. Despite their valiant efforts, Camelot's defenses crumbled under the ferocity of the attack. Among the chaos, Prince Vortigern, inexplicably weakened by the presence of magic, urged his brother, King Uther, to surrender. Uther, unwavering in his resolve, refused to yield. Armed with his legendary sword, Excalibur, he faced Mordred in battle. The blade, imbued with immense power, proved to be the deciding factor. Uther struck down his adversary, quelling the invasion. Following the war, Uther convened his council to determine the fate of the remaining sorcerers. While some, including Sir Bedivere and Sir William, argued that not all magic users were complicit in Mordred's schemes, citing the benevolence of Merlin, who had gifted Uther the sacred sword, Vortigern opposed leniency. Reluctantly, Uther conceded and declared an end to hostility against the sorcerers. That night, driven by insatiable ambition, Vortigern enacted a sinister plan. In secrecy, he led his wife to an underground chamber, offering her as a sacrifice to the eldritch moat hags in exchange for unimaginable power. As his newfound might coursed through him, he orchestrated a coup, commanding his forces to seize the castle. Uther, sensing the betrayal, hurried to wake his wife and their infant son, Arthur. Desperate to escape, they fled towards the docks. But before they could reach safety, they were intercepted by a spectral warrior, an unearthly assassin conjured from the depths of darkness. Uther and his queen met a tragic end, but fate intervened for Arthur. He was placed in a boat and carried by the river's current to Londinium. The vessel was discovered by Lucy and her fellow courtesans, who raised the boy within the confines of their bustling establishment. Arthur grew up believing he was the illegitimate son of one of the working women. Enduring relentless mockery from the local children, he sought out the mentorship of a martial artist, Master George, to defend himself. Under George's tutelage, Arthur honed his skills, mastering the art of combat while navigating the city's underworld. By adulthood, he had risen to prominence as a cunning crime lord, yet nightmares of his past plagued his sleep. Visions of a shadowed figure and a weeping woman on a storm-lashed dock. Meanwhile, Vortigern ruled with an iron fist, redirecting the kingdom's resources towards the construction of a towering monument of unknown purpose. One morning, the tides receded, revealing Excalibur embedded in a stone. Attempts to retrieve the blade proved futile, as none among the royal soldiers could lift it. Alarmed by this omen, Vortigern sought counsel from the moat hags, demanding an explanation. The hags reminded him of the immutable balance of power. Just as his dominion had grown, so too had the force destined to oppose him. If he wished to secure his reign, he had to find Arthur and eliminate him. Back in Londinium, Arthur surprised Lucy with a stash of gold, pilfered from a Viking who had mistreated her. Lucy was astonished. Crossing the Vikings was a dangerous endeavor. Before she could voice her concerns, royal guards stormed the brothel, hunting for a rebel who had sabotaged the king's fleet. Though Arthur despised the monarchy, he prioritized the safety of his people, and when he discovered William, a fugitive, hiding in the establishment, he handed him over to the guards. Shortly after, Arthur was approached by Jack, a high-ranking officer, who questioned his dealings with the Vikings and the rebellion. Jack also noted the growing number of mysterious inscriptions appearing throughout the city, graffiti proclaiming the return of the true king. Although Arthur denied any involvement, Jack remained skeptical, warning him of the risks. Days later, Vortigern demanded an update on Excalibur. His trusted enforcer, Mercia, confessed that the sword remained immovable and that whispers of insurrection were growing. Seeking reassurance, Vortigern turned to Lady Maggie, an advisor who, unbeknownst to him, was aligned with the resistance. Maggie feigned loyalty, assuring him that the people revered their king, which momentarily eased his concerns. In the dead of night, Arthur was ambushed by royal guards. Though he fought fiercely, he was ultimately overpowered and taken to Camelot. Upon arrival, he found himself in a queue of men, all forced to attempt pulling the sword from the stone. With little interest in the spectacle, Arthur begrudgingly grasped the hilt, only for the kingdom itself to tremble as glowing runes illuminated the blade. Overwhelmed by a surge of power, he collapsed unconscious. When he awoke, he was confined within a chamber, face to face with Vortigern. The king revealed Arthur's true heritage, but Arthur rejected the claim, insisting he was nothing more than a commoner. However, Vortigern had already investigated the brothel and uncovered Arthur's hidden wealth, proof of ambition, and therefore a threat. Meanwhile, within the rebel stronghold, a sorceress sent by Merlin arrived, seeking an audience with Bedivere. She revealed her mission, to guide Arthur and reclaim the throne. But first, they needed to extract him from the clutches of the king. As dawn broke, Camelot's citizens gathered in the castle courtyard to witness the so-called returning king. Vortigern, eager to cement his authority, demanded Arthur surrender the power of Excalibur. When Arthur refused, the guards moved to execute him, until a sudden cacophony of chaos erupted. Birds swarmed from above, animals raged in frenzy, and the crowd descended into pandemonium. Amidst the disorder, the rebels stormed the stage, retrieving Excalibur and spiriting Arthur away. Fleeing through the city streets, Arthur fought alongside his newfound allies, escaping across the river at great cost. Several rebels fell in battle. Upon reaching safety, Arthur learned of his past, the fate of his childhood home, and his inescapable role in the battle to come. Though skeptical, he agreed to wield the sword, albeit reluctantly. To unlock Excalibur's full potential, the sorceress led Arthur to the Dark Lands, where he would undergo a harrowing trial. Left to survive alone, he confronted nightmarish creatures, forced to rely on the sword for protection. After days of struggle, he reached an ancient altar and placed the blade upon it, triggering an overwhelming vision. In a flash of memories, he relived the night of his parents' demise. He saw Uther battling a monstrous warrior, the final stand of a noble king. He saw his younger self handing Excalibur back to his father, and he saw the unmasking of the demon knight, revealing none other than Vortigern himself. The betrayal had been orchestrated from the very beginning. When Arthur regained consciousness, he realized the tower Vortigern was constructing mirrored the one from his vision. The sorceress confirmed his suspicions. The king sought to ascend to Mordred's level of power. Worse still, she revealed the truth behind the war. It had been Vortigern, not Mordred, who initiated the conflict. The two had struck a sinister pact. Mordred would eliminate Uther in exchange for a share of dominion over the kingdom. Meanwhile, the great wizard Merlin, in an act of defiance, stole the Staff of Dominion, an artifact of immense magical power. With it, he forged a weapon unlike any other, a blade capable of channeling the very essence of the gods. Excalibur was born, and with its divine strength, Merlin shattered the Tower of Shadows, an ancient structure designed to concentrate magical power into a single wielder. Fearing that such a weapon could fall into the wrong hands, he entrusted it to the Lady of the Lake, who bound its power to the bloodline of Uther Pendragon, ensuring that only his descendants could wield it. Returning to the rebel hideout, Arthur found his allies waiting with grim news. His home had been reduced to ashes. The tyrant Vortigern, through his enforcers Jack and Mercia, had razed the district to the ground in their desperate search for him. Though some of Arthur's friends had managed to rescue the women and a few others, many had vanished into the night. Consumed by rage, Arthur declared that he would not stop until Vortigern was dead. With the rebels gathering around him, Arthur laid out a bold plan. William suggested enlisting the noble houses for support, but Arthur dismissed the idea. He knew the aristocracy would never accept a street-bred warrior as their leader. This fight, he declared, belonged to the people. If Vortigern would not step down, they would force him into the open by striking at the one thing he valued above all else, his tower. The resistance set their plan in motion. They sank the barges carrying stone to the tower's construction site, blocking off the river. They intercepted royal convoys and freed the enslaved children used for labor. Using inside knowledge from one of the rescued courtesans, they poisoned the supply of brandy meant for the king's private palace and set fire to his favorite hall. Each act of defiance sent a clear message: Camelot's people would no longer live in fear. In response, a desperate Vortigern sought aid from the Viking mercenaries, agreeing to terms he would have once considered beneath him. However, even the Vikings hesitated, wary of the growing legend of the Born King. Determined to crush the rebellion, Vortigern arranged a secret meeting with the kingdom's most powerful barons in Londinium. This intelligence reached the rebels through Maggie, their informant within the court. Seeing an opportunity, Arthur and his men devised a plan to unalive Vortigern. On the appointed day, William positioned himself in a hidden tower, his bow trained on the approaching royal carriage. Arthur, watching from a rooftop, sensed something was wrong. It was too easy. He was right. The real Vortigern was never in the carriage. The entire scenario had been orchestrated as a trap. From a concealed vantage point, Vortigern watched alongside Maggie, revealing that he had always known she was feeding information to the rebels. The man in the carriage was a mere decoy. Despite this revelation, William loosed his arrow, striking the impersonator down, but the damage was done. Guards descended upon the rebels, forcing them into open combat. In the ensuing battle, Baclac was gravely wounded, and Rubio fell behind, unaliving himself to buy time. The remaining fighters fled into Master George's school, seeking refuge through his hidden tunnels, but the townsfolk, emboldened by Arthur's defiance, refused to run. Instead, they stood their ground, determined to fight. As the battle raged, the mage attempted to rally nature to their aid, calling upon birds to distract the royal guards. But the spell failed, and she was captured. The sight of her shackled and beaten enraged Arthur beyond reason. Gripping Excalibur with both hands, he unleashed the full force of the blade, slaughtering an entire army in seconds. Witnesses peered from windows, stunned by the sheer magnitude of his power. The rebels regrouped in a safe house, waiting anxiously for nightfall, hoping Baclac and Blue would return. The city, meanwhile, erupted into riots. Tales of Arthur's abilities spread like wildfire, but still, he resisted the role of king. Later that night, Blue returned, dragging a dying Baclac behind him. Knowing he wouldn't survive, Baclac begged Arthur to leave him behind. But before they could escape, Vortigern's men stormed the hideout. They had followed Blue, suspecting the child's connection to the rebels. Vortigern confronted the wounded Baclac, demanding Arthur's location. When Baclac refused to betray his friends, Vortigern slashed off his ear as a test. Blue, unable to bear the sight, screamed in horror. Sensing an opportunity, Arthur seized a guard in exchange for Baclac's freedom. But Vortigern, cold and unshaken, executed Baclac on the spot. Using the distraction, Arthur grabbed Blue and fled to the boats, escaping into the night. The following morning, Vortigern issued a decree. Anyone found aiding the rebels would be executed. Arthur, burdened by the loss, threw Excalibur into the lake, renouncing his destiny. He fled into the woods, consumed by doubt. But the Lady of the Lake had not yet finished with him. As he sank into the muddy ground, her hand reached out, pulling him into her ethereal realm. There, she showed him a vision of the future, a Camelot ruined under Vortigern's tyranny, its people enslaved, its light extinguished. Only by accepting his birthright could Arthur prevent this fate. Emerging from the lake, Excalibur blazing with renewed power, Arthur roared as his soul finally embraced the sword's call. The rebels found him transformed, ready to lead. Meanwhile, Vortigern, driven by paranoia, captured Rubio and tormented him until he revealed the rebels' location. As Arthur and his allies prepared for war, they returned to their stronghold only to find it in ruins. An execution squad had already struck, leaving behind a grim message: surrender or face slaughter. Bedivere infiltrated the castle, confirming that Blue and the mage were alive, held as bait to lure Arthur in. When Arthur arrived, Vortigern demanded Excalibur in exchange for their release. Before complying, the mage enacted one last enchantment, awakening the ancient power hidden within Arthur's blood. She summoned a venomous serpent, biting Arthur's neck, granting him the ability to perceive the hidden forces of magic. This, she assured, would protect him in the final battle. Arthur entered the castle, and as Vortigern prepared to execute him, a massive serpent descended upon the throne room, unleashing chaos. The mage's plan had worked. Arthur reclaimed Excalibur, while the streets of Camelot erupted in rebellion. Desperate for victory, Vortigern sought one final power source. The moat hags demanded a terrible price. Weeping in agony, he transforms his daughter into a demonic warlord. Arthur faced him atop the Dark Tower, their battle shaking the very foundations of the kingdom. At first, Vortigern overwhelmed him, declaring the sword his by right. But as Arthur teetered on the brink of defeat, the mage's poison unlocked a buried memory, the moment his father fell. This time, Arthur did not look away. With newfound mastery of Excalibur's divine energy, Arthur struck down Vortigern, declaring that the tyrant had made him who he was. To add irony, Arthur kissed his uncle's hand before obliterating him, bringing the entire tower crashing down. In the days that followed, Camelot mourned its fallen heroes. Arthur gathered his allies around a newly crafted round table, inviting them to shape the future of the kingdom. The Vikings, seeking to collect on their deal, demanded land or war. Arthur's response? They would bow before him as allies, or not at all. The Vikings knelt. Before a vast crowd, Bedivere crowned Arthur, and as the new king raised Excalibur, he vowed Camelot would never fall again. And just like that, a legend was reborn. Arthur embraced his destiny, but not without sacrifice. Friends were lost, blood was spilled, and a kingdom was forever changed. But the real question remains, would you have what it takes to wield Excalibur? Let us know in the comments. And if you love epic movie recaps, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We've got more legendary battles coming your way.